All right. Thank you a lot for coming to my talk named Remixing Frontend Development because I thought that was a catchy name that would get me on stage on NDC, and here we are. A little bit about me before we start with a little delay. That was awkward. My name is Kristofer. I'm 35 years old. I'm the father of two, husband of one. I own a dog named Burger. And I worked at Beck for just under a decade. And even before that decade, I was just enamored and fascinated with web development. This is what I wanted and got for my, I believe, 14th birthday. See, I've always been fond of computers, and my birthday is in the middle of summer. And every summer we go over to my summer or our summer cabin, where I spent an average of 6 weeks having fun, playing outside, swimming, catching crabs, being bored because I couldn't be in front of my computer. So, and my birthday's in the middle of summer, as I said, and I wanted this, I got this, and I remember plowing through it in about a couple of weeks and just trying to learn PHP programming because that was the coolest thing I knew. And I had borrowed the book on PHP from the library earlier on. And I just wrote code on paper and just tried to understand, like when to use single quotes and when to use double quotes, and it was a struggle. And so I started. I started out creating personal websites. This was my first web business, Selbekk design. Notice, like you can't probably see, but I know I'm charging 500 kroners or about $50 for a custom-built website with its own custom-built CMS. So it was kind of a deal back then. Not the best build quality, I'll give you. Also made a few personal websites. This is me at my most awkward. This is all pushing boundaries on being awkward. And I even made some Counter-Strike clan websites in order to get that particular clan to idle in my IRC channel so I could get that coveted Q bot, or was it L bot? I don't remember. It was very important to me back then. And you can even see like I'm using tables for this design. It's like quite obvious. At some point, I even helped my dad's business partner, Fridtjof Arngren, set up a site for his electronic business. And as some of you know, this page kind of escalated over time. I just want to make it clear, though, that all I did was set up his GeoCities account and just teach him how to add stuff to the page. And in retrospect, that might have been like my main mistake there. All right, anyways. I love the web. I've been doing the web for a long time, and I just adore it. I love it for its simplicity. It's just HTML, some structure, some CSS styling, and some JavaScript on top. I love the flexibility it provides us just by being so simple, yet you can create so many crazy cool things with it. And I love the opportunity it enables with a lot of underrepresented people and a lot of rich white guys as well. A lot of opportunity in the web. And I love how it has always progressed over time and always continues to progress over time, even when at times it kind of moves in circles. And going back to the roots of the web is basically what I'm going to talk to you about today. Because some things, and I know I'm going to sound as old as I feel right now, but some things were better in the good old days. And to really drive my point home, and since you're stuck with me here for an hour anyhow, let's take a quick look at the history of front-end development before we get into Remix. Because when we started out, all we had was documents, right? So Tim Berners-Lee came up with HTML as a way to semantically structure documents in a way that computers could kind of parse and display easily in 1993. 2 years later, Brendan Knight came up with JavaScript, or what we now know as JavaScript. And the year after that, our co-Norwegian, Håkon Vemli, launched the first edition of CSS. what would be known as the go-to approach for making stuff look great online. But even with all of this in place, most of what people did on the internet was just consuming already created content, right? After all, the internet's vision, or initial vision at least, was to provide access to all the information in the world, not to tweet about it. At some point, though, people craved more. More specifically, they wanted to write on people's websites that they had visited them, I guess. That was the main point of the guest book. This might not be historically correct, like why we evolved, but I just want you to reminisce with me for a quick second to a time so pure and so innocent that you could just let anyone write stuff on your website, and 99 times out of 100, that kind of went all right. Like, people behaved in 1995. And but that guest book wouldn't work if you didn't have some kind of scripting. So people started adding, I guess, Perl scripts. I first got interested when I learned PHP. But suddenly you could do stuff like save things in a database, or fetch data, or send emails, or send orders. And several years later, you would even remember to escape whatever you put into those SQL strings. I don't know about you, but I saw some code I wrote when I was like 16 years old, and I had some concerns. All right, but anyhow, you could do a lot of cool stuff now with the internet. You could send emails and orders, and suddenly a lot of what was only possible previously by installing a piece of software on your computer was now doable and possible through the browser. It didn't take long before big business started using this for all it was worth. But big businesses often buy big enterprise software, and few were better at selling this and marketing this than Oracle and Microsoft. In a matter of years, Java and .NET were the predominant web platforms in the world, servicing millions of users with almost the same amount of numbers of lines of code. The things you could do, like the range you could do, increased, but so did the complexity of our code. We created heavy backends to serve custom-made versions of HTML documents per request. In 1995, Internet Explorer 5 dropped, and what a difference that made, because Microsoft had figured out a way to send requests back to the server by using JavaScript. Also known as Ajax, which is, I guess, this soccer team or football team. So instead of sending a request through the browser, through navigation, for every change you wanted to make, you could just do that now in the background and provide real interactivity on your website. And this was, in many ways, a revolution. It was a huge step in making the browser not a document delivery tool, but an application delivery tool. It didn't take long before we saw breakthroughs like Gmail or Google Maps using these techniques to provide us with real cool experiences online. That was real app-like. You had to install software for that previously. Writing real applications in the browser, though, like putting all of that business logic up front, wasn't all that fun, though. JavaScript wasn't implemented the same in all browsers, for instance. And this led to a lot of frustration, and also the creation of a little library called jQuery. So jQuery normalized how we wrote JavaScript across browsers and gave us some of the first tools we had to write accessible and easy-ish code for the browser. And jQuery was, and still is, actually incredibly popular. The news that I could find on this is that from Built With, which said that 78% of the top 1 million websites in the world still use jQuery in some way, or shape, or form. Compare that to like 14% of sites using React, for instance. It's crazy to me. But we used jQuery to write apps. Or we tried to, at least. And today, a lot of that code is just known as like jQuery spaghetti, right? So in an attempt to structure all of this code, we started creating frameworks on top of jQuery or similar libraries. And this started what was known as like the front-end library wars, where a new library or new framework would pop up every, let's say, every month or so. And I remember that time in front-end development as just being a hard time to work in front-end development because you had to learn new stuff all the time, and then you had to write stuff, and then you had to basically just throw that stuff away. Because a lot of innovation just meant a lot of rewrites, outdated code, and just headache. I remember writing Knockout and Backbone and Marionette and Angler, Mithril even. There were a lot of contenders and like one over the other, over and over again. But none of them really brought that paradigm shift. That was until 2013 when Pete Hunt and Jordan Walk stood on stage at JSConf US, I believe, and introduced a groundbreaking new technology that come up with at Facebook called React, or React. I'll spare you this particular history of the lesson, but React was definitely that paradigm shift that we had been looking for. First of all, it was really declarative, so you didn't really have to write how to do stuff in the DOM. You just said what you wanted in there. And you also got to co-locate your HTML structure inside of your JavaScript code. That was really big. And also, although it stumbled out of the gate, after a few months, really, the community adoption was just enormous. So that was really cool. And soon after React came out, other declarative libraries like Vue and Svelte came out. So there was a lot of competition in that space as well, but at least we had crossed that chasm. Kind of a new paradigm was in order. And as a consequence of all these new technologies, writing single-page apps just became hugely popular. And with good reason, because the user experience was snappy, the developer experience was really good, it was quicker to iterate than before. And writing your applications as front-end apps instead of back-end apps had such a much lower entry level than writing your stuff in .NET or Java. And at some point, writing basically static websites felt like it felt more natural to do that in React than in good old HTML, just because of that developer experience of it. There you go. All wasn't well though, because with front page or single page applications, SEO was lacking. Initial load times were long because you had to download a lot of code, and downloading lots of code just to show a good old document just kind of always seemed a bit wrong to me. So we did what we always had been doing and innovated and created new stuff and came up with a new concept we never heard about before called server-side rendering. So basically what that meant was that we took our front-end code, we ran that in a Node server to make it spit out HTML, passed that into, like it just sounds like JSP or ASP.NET, right? And but it kind of worked because we got to maintain a lot of that, the upsides as well. While this has been a feature of React since day one, though, it got really popular with the advent of Next.js a couple of years later. But with Next or Nuxt or any other server-side rendering framework, we're really close to where we first started, right? Because what's really the difference between this and what we did in the good old days? Isn't this really close to what we did with PHP or with JSP or ASP.NET? Truth be told, though, the best practices of 2022 is pretty close to what we did in 2002. Like, we create our HTML server-side, we make them interactive after they were loaded, just like we pass back HTML and then a bundle of jQuery spaghetti. But the technologies have evolved since 2002. We might have gone full circle, but we picked up a few tricks along the way. Because while we started with no interactivity, we got into a place where we can create immersive applications with low latency interactions, quicker load times, and much better SEO. To me, like, we're at the best of both worlds. So there are a lot of great ways to create these kinds of applications today. There are tons of great alternatives out there. I'm not claiming anyone to be the best, but a lot of them create their own interfaces and just abstract away the web as I've known to learn it. And my thesis is that you shouldn't really have to, right? Because what you know about the web and the fundamentals of the web should be applicable to how you write your code today. It's web fundamentals, after all, right? So imagine my joy when some of my favorite technologists on Twitter talk about the new server-side rendering framework built on those exact ideologies. So Remix, shown here by this little disk, is a framework that builds on top of those wonderful web technologies. It takes advantage of that fantastic web platform I've been bragging about and that we grew up to love and adore. It builds on the very foundations of the web and builds on APIs that we already know from working with the web over the years. So after developing websites for and web applications, even for closing in on 2 decades now, this is what brings me the most joy of all. It really does. It's the best mix of developer productivity and wonderful user experiences that I've ever encountered. And that's what I want to show you today. So, long story short, Remix is a framework on top of React. It builds on web standards. It focuses on end user experience, and it provides a great developer experience as well. And it has a really catchy name, which helps. All right, so instead of showing the slides, I just want to show you what I love about this wonderful tech by live coding for 45 minutes. So if we're religious, let's start with the biggest bet, which is changing the screens. All right, and then all right. All right. Can the people in the back see? All right. So I'm just basically going to build a pretty simple application from scratch today. It's just a simple blog application. We'll go through how you set it up from scratch, and I'll show you the main concepts of Remix. So to get started, you write, oops. This was much easier on my kitchen. NDC demo. All right, which is basically just their boilerplate tool. It asks you if you just want the basics or full-on stack. Remix has something they call stacks, which are basically packages where you get a lot of stuff included. So like testing frameworks or end-to-end testing or databases or deployment targets and all that stuff. I'm not going to bother with any of that today, although it's kind of cool to use. I just want to use the basics. Then it asks you where you want to deploy it. It doesn't really matter to us. I'm not going to put this in production right away, at least. But you have a few different places you can deploy to. Fly.io is really cool because it can actually deploy to CDNs and run stuff on the edge. That's also pretty nice. Then it asks you if you want TypeScript or JavaScript, and obviously I want TypeScript, and I just love the fact that they've made that the default by now, which it should be in 2022. And I want to run npm install. All right. So far, so good. I've warmed up the caches. This should work. And while it does all of that, we can look at what it'll create. It'll probably create it in this here, but as you see, I've made sure not to screw anything up. So this is basically what it's going to create. So there's a lot of basic just boilerplate stuff like README and tsconfig with strict equals true, which is what it should do, right? There's also a remix.config, which lets you configure a lot of stuff, really. I haven't ever had to use it, so that feels good. But yeah, the opportunity to do so. And also ESLint is set up with some mostly not annoying rules, so that's also good. The public folder is for whatever public files you want to have. So if you have some PDFs, you can put them in there. That's always good. And then we move to the app folder. All right. So the app folder is basically where your entire application lives. This is where you put all your application logic. And it comes with a few default files. We'll start at root. So this is gonna suck because we're not done downloading node modules ready. So we could do this. All right. So this is what you get. This is basically what renders out into the browser or from the server even. We'll get back to the meta function in a bit, but this is the root element of your application. And notice that you actually get to render the HTML tag as well. That's really cool. I've never done that before, but so I thought that was really neat. There's also some special tags here. For example, meta, which comes from Remix, which basically just renders all the stuff you put in here through char set or title or viewport as meta tags. So that's pretty nice. Same goes with links. If you have link tags for style sheets or fonts or some kind of resource you want to prefetch, for example, you could do the exact same thing with export const links, and then you can pull that off. All right, so that's basically it. It doesn't really do anything more than that. Then the entry, we have an entry.client and entry.server. Entry.client basically just kicks off it hydrates the client code. So you can comment this out and stuff would still work, but it wouldn't be a React app. It would just be server-side rendered. The entry.server looks a little bit more advanced, but it's mostly React that makes it advanced because we're using their new render to pipeable stream API, which makes it possible to just stream HTML through down to the user as it gets ready. It looks a little bit advanced, but it basically just renders this. Then it says when the shell is ready, which I obviously have no idea what it does, but when it's ready, that shell, I'm just gonna resolve a promise with the response with the body, which is basically just a pass-through stream, and then we just add to the stream as we go, I think. And also, if you want to do stuff only on the server, like set up Sentry or stuff like that, that's typically where we do this. All right. Finally, we have this index route, which is basically the like anything you'll find in the route directory will be routes in your application. So the index route goes to the slash, and then if I add slash posts, spoiler alert, we will have posts later. It will map to that. So that's basically how it works. All right, but hopefully this finished. Look at that. So I'm just gonna run. I'm just gonna get into the correct thing and then start the server. Hopefully I don't have anything screwed up already. That would be terrible. There you go. Fun thing about Remix, it uses ESLint behind the bars, so it recompiles and it starts up really quick. All right, so this is basically what you get out of the box. So I want to delete all of that and create some cool stuff. Before I do, though, I just want to cheat a little bit because I've set up a fake API in this file, which I'm just going to copy over. And just to make it a little bit more fun to follow along, less stuff I could just screw up. I call it api.server.ts because if it ends with server, then it doesn't get included by default in the client bundle. So that's pretty cool. I'll go through all this in a second. I'm just going to finish copying stuff. Right, this is my database, which is a JSON file. It's totally normal. Use it in production if you want. All right, and then I've written some really nice styles, which makes this not look completely terrible, hopefully. All right, and then finally on the root, I've also included this links function, which includes CSS reset and my styles. I'm gonna copy that over as well. Root, and then there we go. And then import. I've never really live coded on stage before, but this is not terrible. Or perhaps it is, but don't tell me. All right, so now I guess we can close all of those, close my cheating thingies, and we can get going. All right, yeah, let's stop by the API file. Basically, I'm just gonna create a super simple blogging application. So I have a blog post, and it has a title, and it has a slug, and it should say excerpt, but I called it intro, and now it's still called intro, and the body, which could be markdown, I guess. And then I have this function called getPosts, which calls this weird function read. Both read and save, not read and write for some reason, are basically just reading this database file or writing to it. And adding a little delay just to make it sound more plausible. All right, and so I had get post, which gets all my posts. Then I have get post by slug, get some by slug, or returns null if it can't find it. And then I add a post, or I prepend a post to the post list and save it. All right, so what I want to start out doing is to just delete all this. And then I just want to what do I want to do? I want to show a list of all my posts. So let's do that. All the posts, and then I need to get the posts from somewhere. But I'm not really sure where I should get those from. Typically, from a create React app point of view, I would typically get them from an API, right? So I would use SWR, just fetch. In Remix, what's really cool about Remix is that you can like co-locate your server code and your client code in the same file. It just kind of makes sense and doesn't blow out of proportions, or it hasn't for me anyhow. And they use this concept of what we call magic exports, which they aren't really magic, they're just conventions. So if you create a function that you call loader, that function will be called on every GET request. And that will basically provide the data to your component. So let's create one of those. All right. Loader function. I kind of realized that live coding is a little bit easier when you have GitHub Copilot, because it just kind of writes what you were supposed to write. Oh yeah, that's right. That's actually just what I wanted. But then you get spoilers. No, take it away. All right, so basically what we want to do is to call our API. So we do const posts equals await get posts from our API.server. And then we want to return that to our function somehow, and we'll get back to where we use them. Basically, what you do then is you could, since this is always built on like the basic of web technologies, you just return a new response. Oops. And this is the response you get when you do a fetch in your browser. So that's basically what it's all about. And then you can pass in JSON.stringify and then the post and just set the content type to the correct content type and stuff like that. Or you could cheat a little bit and use JSON, which is basically just a wrapper for all of that. But in the end, it's always just a regular response being returned. So it just uses the web. I just love that part of it. All right. Cool, so let's return that. Then to access this code, then we want to call this custom mode called use loader data. So let's use that. Also from here, which is really cool, but it isn't typed. I love types, so let's make it typed. Loader data equals posts, and then I have this post type, and it's an arrow of posts. And then I want to pass this in here, so I know this part of the site accepts the contract, and then I'll pass that in here, and I'll get the types. All right, and then we'll loop them out, and like so. An article with the key of post.slug, and an h2 with the post.title, and a p or a paragraph, I guess, with the post.intro. And then I even want to have a link to, perhaps I get some help. Look at that, posts/post-slug. Which says read more. All right, and without further ado, but I put it there. I didn't put it there. Should put it here. All right. My proudest moment. And I have 2 kids. All right. So basically just, these are not my greatest blog posts given, but still it just fetches stuff and then it just shows up on the browser. And if you're really clever about it, you'll see it actually comes out as HTML. All right, so this is cool and all. Let's create a post route as well. Then we have to basically just create a dynamic route, which I'm sure you've heard about before, which basically takes a parameter, and that parameter is the slug of the article. To do that in Remix, you have to use the $. So let's call it $slug.tsx, and we'll get started from the top again. So export the default function post page, which will return something at some point. Yeah, right. I'll deal with that later. First, though, we have to create the loader. Const loader function, like so, and lo and behold, we actually get params out of here, and we can get the slug out of here. And this word and this word needs to be the same. That's kind of the important thing. And there's one way you can screw this up, and I actually did that while building this demo, because I called this posts.tsx instead. So I always want to make sure, and it helps JavaScript or TypeScript as well, if I just specify, check if it isn't there. If it isn't there, I guess it will throw an error. The file name doesn't include slug, which is required. So I'll cache that later on. And then I want to get the actual article, if I do have a slug, or a post equals await get post by slug. And then I want to return, oh yeah, and then I want to check if I don't have a post at all, like if the slug doesn't match anything in my database. It happens. I'll throw a JSON response with some data, or not data, not found. All right, and then as a second argument, which is also the second argument to the response object, I can pass in the status code. So status 44. And if it does exist, I'll just return the JSON with the posts. And here again, I want to just use loader data, post, like so, singular post this time, just to make sure that I adhere to my contract. And then we'll get the post like so, use loader data, have to install it or get it. Okay, cool. Then we want to do the post title and the style. There you go. Like I have similar versions in these other ones, so I get like crazy good like auto completions. All right, and then I get the post body. Alrighty, I think that should do. Just try to click on one of these. And yeah, my CSS skills are terrible, but making stuff is great, which looks really cool. But unfortunately, as you can see, I don't parse the markdown yet. And to be honest, I really do not want to make that happen on the client side, because all these markdown libraries are really expensive to just download. So I just want to do that on the server side, which is one of the like tenets of Remix, is that whatever you can do on the server side, you do on the server side. All right. So let's try to introduce that as well. Then I have to enter the correct place, and then I just have to install a markdown parser, which is marked, which is, I don't know, the first one, I know. And then we need to run marked on the body somehow. And I could do this in the loader, but then the marked thing would be included in the, or the dependency would be included in the client bundle, because it can't really be tree shaken. But I can do it in the API.server file, like here. So here I could just do import marked, from marked. And then I'll just do post.body. Don't look away if you don't like mutations. This is fine. It's a demo. And if I do that, it almost works, right? Like we have some kind of, it looks like HTML, but it looks a little bit too much like HTML. So, and I, back in the days, it was a little bit easier to avoid doing this, because now you have so nice like auto completions. So I just have to click D and enter. I can be in dangerous territory. And then call it post body. And give me fat text. Yeah. All right. All right. So now we have Markdown working on the server, so I don't have to send it to the client, which is really cool. But what happens if I do stuff like this? I get a 404, but it would be great to have like a custom 404 page, right? Well, not to anyone's surprise, they do have a trick for that, which I'm going to show you in a second. If you export some called catch boundary. Whenever you throw a JSON object, for example, or a response like that, then it will actually render this instead of the other stuff. So then you can do, to get the error, you do use catch, I think. Use catch. And then you say if the status is 404, then you return main and was not found. Sorry, bruv. Otherwise, just perhaps return main. The house is on fire. I don't know. You could do the same thing with errors. If you have unexpected errors, you have error boundaries in React. You can just export the same error boundary instead of cache boundary, and it will be custom to that particular route. So if it works, sorry, bruv, wasn't found, but it worked, so I'm happy. All right. So we also want to add a new thing, which is like the second really cool feature of Remix, which are mutations. Because back in the days, you always did mutations with like sending an AJAX request, right? And then you had to upgrade. It was just a lot of work. So again, I'm just going to steal some existing code. Not because it's hard, really, I promise. It's just a lot of writing. So look away for a quick second. All right, so we do export default function, new post, and then we return main thingy with h1 new post, and then we basically create a form. We want to pass stuff in with method equals post. And then we want to look away for more second, and we create a post. And if we, well, I'm not going to add a button to go there, but if I just go to posts/new, we get a new posts kind of thingy. So this kind of looks good, but it doesn't really work yet because we haven't written a handler for that post. Now, by default, if I create instead of a loader, which we remember always runs on get requests, returns a function called action that will run on post, patch, delete, put, anything else in get. So that's basically the handler for that form. So let's create one of those as well. They're really similar to what you get in the loader. So they feel kind of familiar. If we want to get the form data, go away. You could just do request or form data equals await request that form data, and you'll have that as a form data object, which are terrible. I hate them. So instead I'm just going to do object from entries, and it's going to be a regular object for me. All right, and then I just want to verify that people have filled out the title, they filled out the slug, they filled out the introduction, and the body. So let's create a quick validation function, which I hope will like autocomplete real quickly. Data, which is a record of string unknown, like so. Close. Data dot title or data dot slug, data dot intro, or not data dot body. It's not valid, otherwise it is valid. And then we could also add a little hint to TypeScript saying that checks whether the data is post. All right. So then we do the same thing. If it's not valid data, then we then we return JSON with error, invalid, missing required fields. All right. And if it does validate, then we just want to create the post. So let's create the posts. Post equals await, add post, I believe. Cool. And then after we've created the post, we just want to redirect the user back to or into their new blog post. So let's do that. And again, you could just create a new response, add the correct headers. Remember whether it was 301 or 302, that doesn't screw you over for a couple of weeks. And just use redirect, which is another, instead of JSON, use redirect. And redirect to that new post's slug. All right, do you think it works? Let's try it. All right, live from the NDC stage. Please work. I really hope. Okay. 1, 2, 3, and boom! It works as well. I'm really proud of myself here today. All right. So that created a new entry in our database, which was really good, and it redirected. But let's see what happens if we lose a field, for example. Well, nothing will happen. Well, if we go into our network, we click it again. Whew. Then I get stressed out. That's all the stuff over there. Oh yeah, okay. Oh yeah, shoot. I need to return a status of 400 because I screwed up as a user, right? So refresh it, click it. You see it kind of refreshes the actual page, so that's actually using the browser to send stuff in. And now the new page returns 400, which is what we wanted. To show that error that we sent in here, then we could use, instead of use loader data, we can use action data. Cool. And the same thing with errors. Oops. Cool. And then we'll do action data. If it's not, the action hasn't run yet, that will just be undefined. So let's assume that it isn't. And if it does have an error, we'll just style it red and show the error. And then, okay, we can try that again. Click it, and then we get actual server-side validation, which is kind of cool. And then, since we live in, I know, the 2020s, the best decade, we want stuff to work over Ajax or over the Fetch API whenever we can, right? We don't really want to go back to the JSP kind of slow old days, if we can. We just want to use JavaScript when we can, and if we can, we'll fall back to the defaults. To do that in Remix, we'll basically just do form instead of form. So a big F instead of a small f. And we'll not get a refresh of the entire site, but stuff will happen over over the Fetch API instead, which is kind of cool. All right, so that was basically the biggest parts I wanted to show you today. There are tons more. One thing, for example, if I want to, is to, on the summary page of all my posts, I want to not run this code on the server on every request. And you really don't have to. And like we always thought we had to, but we don't really, because the web comes equipped with its own kind of static site generator called caching. So if you use cache control headers and have a CDN in front of you, then it will actually work the same way. So you could cache stuff hardly for, let's say, 10 seconds, and then you could add a special header called, or cache control thing called stale while revalidate, to make sure that it revalidates that cache or shows you old content quick or for not a long time. The way to do that is to, in the loader function that just provides the data for this page, we could just add a headers field, and then remember how cache control is written, which is not super easy. And we could do max age 60, or let's say max age 10, and then add stale while we validate for an hour. So basically what this means is that it'll show the old version and then revalidate the cache in the background. So stuff hopefully will be a little bit quicker once you load it, or once you load the data from the cache, which is what we do here. All right. Yeah. I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead and do this, and do see if I can switch back to where I was at some point. But at least, as you can tell, it's pretty quick to build stuff, even in a stressful environment. Okay, and then we do this, and then we do all right. So this is Remix. It's not everything in Remix. I didn't dive into how you could use the use fetcher hook to create more immersive experiences or reusable sign up for this newsletter components further down the stack, not on the route level. I didn't show you layout routes, which is also a really nice, powerful feature where you don't really refetch all of the data at once, or you can fetch more stuff in parallel because Remix knows the entire stack. Or how you could access parent routes data with use matches and stuff like that. It is a great framework for creating both semi-static websites as well as complex app-like interfaces and experiences. And to be honest with you, like, I'm just sold. I haven't had this much fun coding in a long, long time. There are some actual quantifiable upsides to use Remix as well. It is a complete framework that just deals with all setup for you, so you don't really have to deal with the build setup and all the complexities that come with that. It's pretty quick by default, and it's even quicker if you tweak it with a few alterations, like adding cache headers and adding in optimistic UI and stuff like that. It also uses what the web already gives us, which means you probably know how to do stuff in Remix already. And it lets most of your application work even without JavaScript enabled. Ah, crap, I should have shown you that. It's really cool. You can just remove the script stack and stuff will work without all the fetch thingies and all the interactivity, but it will still work because it just uses the web standard. And finally, Remix has a great community. It's built by really clever people. It has a great Discord community if you're stuck. It has some great learning resources and some good documentation as well. So that's the upsides. There are some downsides too, though. Obviously, Remix is a framework after all, and that comes with its own downsides if you don't build everything yourself. It does eliminate the build setup, for example, but if you want to do something special with the build for some reason, then you can't do that as easily as if you set up ES build yourself. And there are a few places where things feel a little bit magic, at least at first, before you get to know how stuff works. Another downside is, in my mind at least, is the documentation, or more like the structure of it. Like, to me, it's hard to find what you're looking for, and what's there is definitely well written, and once you find what you're looking for, you're good. But they definitely have a little bit of work to do right there. Finally, Remix is the newest kid, or the newest-ish kid on the block. It's not a bad thing per se, but it's definitely a thing someone gonna ask you if you want to use this at work. There are still kinks to be ironed out in the APIs they've chosen. Not a lot, but there's probably gonna be a break and change there too, just because it's only been developed on for like a year or two, and stuff evolves. So keep that in mind. Development to me, like, or development is cyclical. So if you've been developing for a while, Remix will probably feel strangely familiar to you. It uses some APIs I haven't really used since I was a teenager, and that just feels good. It feels like I'm working with the browser, not against it. Like, might be an old saying perhaps, but Remix just uses the platform, and using the platform is good. Um, I know, like, feels like a little bit weird to say, but like to me, like Remix is a fresh breath of air for the web development community, and I couldn't implore you more to try it out in your next project. If you want to learn more, there are some great tutorials at remix.run. Both simple intro app kind of resembles what I've been showing you here today, and also a more complex app with authentication and databases and server setup and all that jazz. So if you want to get to learn it, that's how I learned it, and worked pretty well. Remix, the company, also shares a great ton of community resources on their Twitter feed, so make sure to follow that as well. All right, and with all of that said, I do have 4 minutes left for questions if you want. What now? With stacks, yeah. Yeah, whether or not you can, like, they will set up a database for you with stacks. Yeah, yeah, definitely. They offer some options, and you can also they also set you up with Prism, which is just an API to interact with it in a type-safe way. So that's how I built my crazy new link shortener in one Pilsen programming meetup. So you get going really quickly. But it does also ship with tons of stuff that I'm not a huge fan of personally, like Tailwind. But it once you clean up the stuff you don't need, it's really nice. So definitely give it a try. And also you can create your own stacks, which are really nice. Anyone? No? This guy. You have to speak louder, sir. I've only I haven't looked at Astro more than I've seen some crazy demos of what they can do. So it sounds really wonderful as well. But so what I've understood of Astro is that they just ship small islands of JavaScript where you actually need it. So that's really nice and really neat. But it does come with its own set of constraints, I feel. So, but I do not know enough about it to give you an honest opinion. All right, so I'm definitely not hearing your questions too well. So, but if you do have questions, please come over to me after the talk, and I'll be happy to talk to you. I'm Kristofer. You can find me on @Selbekk, basically anywhere on the internet except Facebook for some reason. So reach out if you want to chat or come over to say hello. Thanks a ton for your time.